The ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict has spelled disaster for Ukraine in every sense of the word, but the loss of crops is proving to be the most damaging aspect of it, having a major impact on farmers. Today we'll be looking more into how the devastating war is affecting the citizens' farms and causing Ukraine's farming industry to collapse. Stay tuned to learn more. First up, Europe's breadbasket. One product that Ukraine's known for is its wheat. The country's actually one of the largest wheat suppliers in the world. According to the website World Population Review, Ukraine was responsible for the production of 24,912,350 tons of wheat this year alone. However, this number has drastically dropped due to the recent conflict. When we take Russia into account as well, Ukraine, these countries combined make up for around 30% of the global wheat trade. So when the military invasion from Russia's end began, the global price of wheat skyrocketed. When the invasion first began, the Ukrainian production of wheat was completely halted, and many countries then restricted or closed off their trades with Russia. Because of this, globally, the production and exporting of wheat became much slower and pricier. Russia also happens to be a large supplier of fertilizer. It is estimated that the country produces around 23% of ammonia exports globally. Fertilizer is crucial in order to maximize the crop that farmers will yield. Once again, because many countries decide to cut off their trades with Russia following the invasion, many farmers were left with a shortage of fertilizer, which only added more problems than the already existing wheat production shortage. Next, we have blocked seaports. During the conflict, a lot of Ukraine's agricultural land was destroyed by attacks. However, this isn't the only thing causing issue with regards to crop production. Russia has decided to block the Black Sea ports. This means that any crop that's to be shipped out of the country can only be shipped through rails and trains or by trucks on the road. Of course, when you take out one of the main methods of transport for many of the country's goods out of the equation, it results in a huge halt of exports and therefore income for the country from their trades. To understand this a bit more, before the Russian invasion, Ukraine exported around 6 million tons of crops and grains a month globally. But according to the analyst APK Inform, only 300,000 tons of grains were shipped out in March 2022, and around 923,000 in April. Analysts are also claiming that around 25 million tons of grain are still stuck in the country and haven't been able to leave due to transport problems. Of course, the longer these food products sit and remain unused, the quicker they'll go bad, and this means really bad news for the Ukrainian economy and for many other countries. Now onto food shortages. We've discussed how the transport issues and direct attacks on farmland cause the issues for Ukraine and many other countries' economies, but all this leads to an inevitable shortage as well. It's obvious that within the country, Ukraine is being very harshly affected on a more direct scale. Shells and attacks coming from Russia are destroying farmlands, and storage units for food are being wiped out on a massive scale as they fall victim to the shells incoming. Aside from the shortage in Ukraine itself, the lack of trade and exports will cause a more indirect effect on other countries that are heavily dependent on Ukrainian exports. For example, Somalia and Benin, both countries in Africa, rely very strongly on Ukraine for wheat imports. Almost 25% of their wheat comes from Ukraine. So what will eventually happen is that so much of their supply gets cut off that the country would face starvation, economic problems, and even a refugee crisis. People could start leaving the countries if the food shortage gets too bad. All these factors combined are creating a global food crisis. According to the chief of the United Nations World Food Program, this is beyond anything we've seen since World War II. As we can see, one event like the halting of wheat production and exports can cause a detrimental chain effect globally that will certainly have lasting effects. Up next, higher food prices and displacement. When there's a food shortage, there's also a change in the prices. More specifically, the food prices go up, but this dilemma usually tends to hit the poorer countries the worst. Like we mentioned before, some countries in Africa depend heavily on Ukraine. These countries already struggle with frequent food shortages due to the factors like their own economy struggling, droughts, famine, and others. In 2021, the food prices worldwide globally shot up by around 28% in certain cases. This is the highest increase the world has seen in roughly 10 years. With such a dire situation on the horizon, this Ukraine-Russia conflict will only be making it worse. Alongside the conflict, the COVID pandemic also caused issues for many food supply chains globally. The pandemic has also increased unemployment and has ruined the financial state of many people and economies. Currently, there are 811 million people who are going hungry globally, and over 2 billion who are suffering from malnutrition due to food shortages and scarcity. According to the FAO, Russia's attack on Ukraine could push another 13 million people into hunger-related problems. Many analysts are also claiming that this is all being done in a strategic way to get Ukraine to suffer from a refugee crisis. For example, those in third world countries face more issues alongside causing direct issues for countries like Ukraine. Many countries in the global south suffer from certain weather conditions that countries in Europe don't face, which makes farming for them a lot more difficult. So when these third world countries face a refugee crisis from factors like food shortages and price hikes, they will move to other countries in the EU, as they most often do. This same pattern can be seen with Ukraine. The country gets attacked, food is scarce and too expensive, expensive, and living conditions aren't the best, so people flee the country. But this isn't all for no reason. In fact, the refugee crisis from Ukraine helps Russia in their support for Russian-backed Ukrainian separatists, which gives them an advantage in the war. Put together the rise in food prices with the current war, and it's safe to say that many people are being very negatively affected. Countries are being cut off from supplies that once kept their economies afloat and stable, and it seems like factors like displacement and famine are only going to get worse from here on out. Moving on now to the placement of farmlands. Not everyone is facing the same issues though. Some farmers and their land are placed in much better positions than others in Ukraine. The Poltava region in northeast Ukraine is one region that became caught up in the attacks. Farmers in the region have claimed that they've started to find pieces of Russian missiles in their fields, but because they caught on later, many farmers there were able to sell out their crops. This harvest and sale allowed them to have some money in their bank accounts, but that money isn't infinite and can only help for some time. Donbass, for example, is one region in Ukraine that's facing a lot of damage from the conflict. For starters, the region has had a pretty long history of violence and conflict, and farmers there are somewhat used to the sudden changes and conflict. According to the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, many smallholder farmers in the Donbass region have had their livestock killed off either through direct attacks from missiles and shells or through indirect means like not having enough food and water to keep the livestock alive and healthy. The average monthly incomes of the farmers here have also dropped dramatically, from roughly $390 to $144. Though the situation here wasn't the best before the current war either. Before, it was estimated that 1 in 3 of the farmers in the region lived in poverty and had family members who left to Russia or the EU in hopes of finding better wages. As of right now, many officials say that 30% of farmland in Ukraine is now occupied or unsafe, and most of that 30 lies in regions like Donbass. Finally, a looming uncertainty. Although some farmers were able to have their seasonal harvest before attacks from Russia, the money made would probably only last a month or so. And when you factor in how the prices of food are going up, perhaps that money made would last even less time. Farmers have spoken about how they are essentially forced to keep working until they can't because of destruction from missiles. One farmer from the Poltava region, Roman Gorobets, has said, "But what is going to happen next? Nobody knows." He's also spoken about how one of the main issues for farming in Ukraine, as of right now, is also exporting. "Function as normally with a lot of hope that the war will end soon, with our victory," was also stated by Gorobets as a closing statement for his interview with Euronews. Although many Ukrainian farmers are still determined to keep working amid the conflict, Russia seems to have no interest in slowing down on their attacks. In many cases, farmers who had fled their land came back and saw that Russians had used tractors, some even the farmers' tractors on the farmland, to dig up and essentially ruin their acres of land. That's a wrap for this video. How do you guys feel about the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian conflict? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.